My brother Billy and I always loved a good scare. From a young age, we were captivated by the unknown, the eerie, and the supernatural. Our childhood was filled with ghost stories, horror movies, and late-night dares. We thrived on the adrenaline rush that came with fear, always seeking the next thrill. We grew up on tales of haunted houses and spooky campfires. Our parents would often tell us stories of the local legends, and we would sit by the fire, wide-eyed and shivering, but always wanting more. Those nights by the campfire were some of our fondest memories, bonding over the shared excitement and terror. So, when we heard about an abandoned cabin deep in the woods, rumored to be haunted, we knew we had to investigate. The stories about this cabin were legendary. People spoke of strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and an overwhelming sense of dread that would envelop anyone who dared to enter. It was the perfect challenge for us. The challenge? Spend 24 hours inside. Easy, right? Wrong. The cabin had a reputation for driving people to the brink of madness. Many had tried, but few had succeeded. The thought of spending an entire day and night in such a place was both thrilling and terrifying, but we were determined to see it through.
The drive was long and dusty. The woods grew thicker. As we drove deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around us, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked out the sun. The road became narrower and more treacherous, and the sense of isolation grew stronger with each passing mile. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching us, waiting for us to make a move. The mist hung low, swirling around the trees and creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down our spines.
We found the cabin nestled in a clearing, shrouded in an unnatural silence. The clearing was eerily quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The cabin stood there, a dark silhouette against the fading light, its presence both inviting and foreboding. It was as if the cabin was waiting for us, daring us to enter. It was a dilapidated wooden structure. The wood was weathered and rotting, the roof sagging under the weight of years of neglect. Vines and moss clung to the walls, giving the cabin an almost organic appearance, as if it had grown out of the forest itself. It was a place that had seen better days, and yet it held a certain allure. Its windows were boarded shut like the eyes of a sleeping demon. The boards were old and splintered, nailed haphazardly across the frames. It was clear that someone at some point had tried to keep something out, or perhaps to keep something in. The sight of those boarded windows sent a chill down my spine. This place had a vibe. You could feel it. There was an energy in the air, a sense of anticipation and dread. It was as if the cabin itself was alive, aware of our presence and waiting to reveal its secrets. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and every instinct told us to turn back, but we had come too far to back down now.
We unloaded our gear, cameras, flashlights, EMF readers, and enough snacks to last us the night. We had come prepared, determined to document every moment of our experience. The trunk of our car was packed with equipment, and we carefully laid everything out, making sure we had everything we needed for the long night ahead. Billy, the practical one, checked the batteries in our equipment. He was always the one to think ahead, to make sure we were prepared for any situation. As he methodically went through our gear, I could see the determination in his eyes. He was ready for whatever the night had in store for us. I, ever the believer, felt a shiver run down my spine as I touched the cold, rusted doorknob. Let the investigation begin. The metal was icy to the touch, and as I turned the knob, the door creaked open with a sound that echoed through the silent forest. We stepped inside, our hearts pounding with a mix of fear and excitement, ready to uncover the mysteries that lay within.
The cabin's interior was worse than we imagined. Dust caked every surface. It was as if time had forgotten this place, leaving it to decay and solitude. The walls, once vibrant with life, now stood as silent witnesses to years of neglect. Every step we took stirred up clouds of dust, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Cobwebs hung from the rafters like macabre decorations. They swayed gently with the slightest breeze, adding to the eerie atmosphere. It felt like walking into a haunted house where every corner held a secret, every shadow a story. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something metallic, something sinister. It was a scent that clung to our clothes, our skin, making it impossible to forget where we were. The furniture, once sturdy and reliable, now seemed fragile, as if it would crumble to dust at the slightest touch.
We chose a corner to set up our command center, hoping to bring some semblance of order to the chaos. The equipment we brought felt out of place in this ancient setting, like trying to merge two different worlds. Laying out blankets and our equipment, we tried to make the space as comfortable as possible, but the oppressive atmosphere made it difficult. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, reminded us of the stories we'd heard about this place. You ever think we're biting off more than we can chew? The question hung in the air, heavy with doubt and fear. It was a moment of vulnerability, a crack in our bravado.
Nah, just a bunch of old wives' tales, right? The dismissive tone was meant to reassure, but it did little to ease the tension. We all knew the stories, the legends that surrounded Skinwalker Ranch. They were hard to ignore, especially in a place like this.
The hours ticked by slowly. We told stories, played cards, and tried to keep our minds occupied. But the unease was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. It was as if the cabin itself was watching us, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets, and tried to ignore the growing unease that was settling over us like a shroud. Every sound, every flicker of light seemed amplified in the silence. It was a silence that pressed down on us, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. The silence outside was unnerving, a stark contrast to the chaos inside our minds. It was a silence that seemed to stretch on forever, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an animal, broken only by the occasional creak of the cabins settling or the rustling of leaves in the wind, or so we thought. As the night wore on, the sounds began to change, taking on a more sinister tone. It was as if the cabin was coming to life, its ancient timbers groaning and shifting in the darkness. We huddled together, our fear growing with each passing moment, knowing that we were not alone in this place. It started subtly, a soft scratching sound coming from the boarded-up window behind us. We paused our game, our eyes meeting across the flickering beam of our lantern.
Probably just a raccoon.
But deep down we both knew it was something more. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, like claws raking against the wood. A cold draft seeped through the cracks in the wall, sending chills down our spines. Our playful banter died down, replaced by a tense silence. Something was watching us. We could feel its presence. The air grew heavy. It felt hard to breathe. As darkness enveloped the cabin, the paranormal activity intensified. The scratching at the window turned into loud banging. Objects began to move on their own. A lantern swung violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls.
An unseen force seemed to be toying with us, its power growing with each passing moment.
The temperature plummeted and a bone-chilling cold seeped into our bones. We huddled together for warmth, our eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the disturbances. Fear, primal and consuming, tightened its grip on our throats. We were trapped in a nightmare.
Panic set in.
We scrambled for the door, desperate to escape the horrors of the cabin.
But it was no use.
The door wouldn't budge.
It was as if an unseen hand held it shut, keeping us prisoner in this haunted hellhole.
We were trapped, hunted.
Our safe haven had become our prison.
Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind sent shivers down our spines.
We were at the mercy of whatever malevolent entity had taken up residence within those decaying walls.
Then it happened.
The entity made its presence known.
A deep, guttural growl echoed through the cabin, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
The growl morphed into a bone-jarring whisper, cold and menacing, that slithered into our ears, wrapping around our sanity like icy tendrils.
"Get out!" it hissed, each word dripping with malice and dread.
The voice seemed to vibrate within our very skulls, a violation of our minds.
We were no longer just witnessing the paranormal.
We were experiencing it firsthand, and it was terrifying.
The first rays of dawn pierced through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, bringing with them a glimmer of hope.
The paranormal activity had ceased.
The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by an almost eerie calm.
We were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but we were alive.
With renewed determination, we finally managed to pry open the cabin door.
The fresh morning air washed over us, carrying the sweet scent of pine and damp earth.
It felt like a blessing.
We stumbled out of the cabin, desperate to put as much distance between us and that cursed place as possible.
As we drove away, the rising sun casting long shadows behind us. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched.
The events of the night played over and over in our minds, each memory a fresh wound on our psyches.
We had entered the cabin seeking thrills, a chance to test our bravery.
We left forever changed, marked by the experience.
The unseen world had revealed itself to us, and it was not a force to be trifled with. Back home, safe in the familiar surroundings of our apartment, we tried to resume our normal lives. The city lights outside our window flickered like distant stars, a stark contrast to the darkness we had left behind. We thought we could forget, that the horrors of that night would fade with time.
But the nightmare lingered. It clung to us like a shadow, creeping into our thoughts and dreams. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sent shivers down our spines. We were prisoners in our own home, trapped by the memories of that dreadful night.
Sleep offered no escape, haunted by vivid nightmares of that night. The moonlight streaming through the window seemed to cast eerie shadows that danced on the walls, reminding us of the forest. Each night we relived the terror, the feeling of being hunted, the sense of impending doom.
The feeling of being watched persisted, an invisible presence lurking just beyond our perception. It was as if the forest had come alive, its dark tendrils reaching out to ensnare us even in the safety of our home. We couldn't shake the sensation that eyes were always on us, watching, waiting.
Then one morning, Billy showed me something that sent a chill down my spine. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing his arm. At first I thought it was just a scratch, but as I looked closer I realized it was something far more sinister.
A strange mark had appeared on his arm overnight. It wasn't just a bruise or a cut, it was a symbol, an eerie, twisted design that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. We had no idea how it got there, but we knew it wasn't a good sign.
3 long, parallel scratches, as if made by claws. They were deep and precise, too perfect to be an accident. It was as if some creature had marked him, claiming him as its own. The sight of those marks filled us with dread, a confirmation of our worst fears.
The mark of the beast. It was a symbol of the terror that had followed us from the woods, a reminder that we were never truly safe. We had thought we could escape, but the beast had found a way to reach us even here.
We had escaped the cabin, but we hadn't escaped the nightmare. The memories of that night were etched into our minds, and now, it seemed, into our very skin. The cabin stood as a dark monument to our fear, a place we could never return to, yet could never truly leave behind.
We were left with the chilling realization, whatever evil lurked in those woods, it had followed us home. The forest was no longer just a place. It was a living, breathing entity that had invaded our lives. And as we stood there staring at the mark on Billy's arm, we knew that our battle with the beast was far from over.